Coming up on this Thursday edition of Newsline at Noon, Korea's National Assembly has come to a shuddering halt after families of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster victims rejected a bipartisan deal for a special probe into the tragedy. The US says it tried earlier this summer to rescue American hostages in Syria, including murdered journalist James Foley, but failed. President Obama vows to continue airstrikes against the Islamist militants. Plus, there are fears the global economy will fall into a prolonged slump with uncertainties lingering and major economies reporting poor performances. These stories and more on Newsline at Noon.
It's noon Thursday, August 21st here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Ju.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime, Korea's rival political parties have fallen back into a standoff on the special bill on the Sewol-ho ferry disaster.
The parties had reached a deal earlier this week, but the main opposition party has since withheld its endorsement of the agreement after the families of the victims said no to it. Myung-kil starts us off.
Bereaved families of April's ferry sinking are calling on lawmakers to overhaul a bipartisan deal aimed at uncovering the truth into the disaster, accusing the government of trying to cover up.
Are you siding with the enemy? The fact the opposition party is telling us to concede to the terms they negotiated with the Saenuri Party's floor leader makes it sound as if we should walk hand in hand with the enemy. That is not possible.
The families held a meeting late on Wednesday to confirm their opposition to the compromised Sewol-ho ferry bill. Rival party floor leaders had ironed out a deal on Tuesday that will make the Saenuri Party receive approval from the main opposition party and the victims' families before nominating two committee members, ending weeks of bipartisan bickering over the special bill. But families of more than 300 people killed in the ferry sinking call on the opposition party to try again to seek more concessions from the ruling party, saying the latest version of the bill would not guarantee a sufficiently thorough probe into the disaster as it lacks investigative and prosecutorial powers. The ruling party said further negotiations were out of the question and regretted the family's rejection of the compromise. Meanwhile, the opposition party had tried to persuade the families to support the bill, but failed to do so. The current political deadlock is preventing the passage of thousands of other bills as opposition lawmakers refuse to hold a plenary session unless the Sewol-ho ferry bill is passed first. Some key pending legislation includes amendments to existing safety regulations and a series of economic bills. Both parties are hoping to agree on creating some kind of consensus with the families within this month. The National Assembly's next extraordinary session begins this Friday. Myung-kil, Arirang News.
While the beheading of U.S. journalist James Foley by Islamic State militants has shocked the entire world, the Pentagon says a secret mission was carried out earlier this summer aimed at freeing American hostages, including Mr. Foley. This revelation comes as President Obama said he was undeterred in his resolve to defeat the militant group. Connie Lee has more.
A spokesperson for the Pentagon has revealed that the United States attempted a rescue operation in Syria earlier this summer, not only to free U.S. journalist James Foley, but also other American hostages being held in Syria by Islamic State militants. It was a secret, major rescue operation launched by U.S. Special Forces against the Islamic State. The Pentagon statement on Wednesday said the operation involved air and ground components, but did not succeed because the hostages were not present at the targeted location. This new information came as the U.S. launched a wave of new airstrikes against Islamic State targets in Iraq. On the same day, President Barack Obama, in a televised statement, said the U.S. will be relentless in the fight against the militant group following the brutal murder of Mr. Foley. President Obama, who said he was heartbroken over the incident, said the U.S. will do what's necessary to see that justice is done. He also compared the militant group to cancer, whose spread must be stopped. The president's message came less than a day after the militants released a video of the American journalist being beheaded. The Islamic State is believed to be holding several American hostages, including journalist Steven Sotloff. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
In line with the U.S. pivot to Asia, the U.S. Navy has unveiled plans to expand its number of ships deployed in the region over the next 5 years. The so-called navigation plan, laid out by Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Jonathan Greenard, calls for an expansion of the U.S. fleet in the Asia-Pacific from 50 to 65 ships by 2019. Washington also plans to increase its presence in the Middle East from 30 to 40 ships over the same period. Now, the document covers fiscal years 2015 through 2019 and serves as a guide to the top Navy officers' budget priorities. The U.S. Treasury's point man on North Korea sanctions is currently in Seoul for talks with senior diplomats of South Korea. Officials say David Cohen and Seoul's top nuclear envoy Hwang Jun-guk and Lee Kyung-soo, the deputy minister for political affairs, review the current status of economic sanctions imposed by the international community against Pyongyang and discuss ways to strengthen cooperation with countries like China on the issue. Cohen is also said to have requested Seoul's cooperation in sanctions against Russia, citing the Ukraine crisis and the recent shooting down of a Malaysian passenger jet. The U.S. official is on a 2-day trip to Korea as part of his Asia trip to 5 countries, including Japan and China.
A former high-level U.S. official has warned North Korea against raising the provocation stakes too much, saying a war would mean the end of North Korea. In an interview with South Korea's Yonhap news agency, former Director of National Intelligence Dennis Blair said the North Korean regime would be wiped out by nuclear weapons if they first used a nuclear weapon themselves. He said North Korea is well aware of this and knows there's a limit to how far they can go. The former intelligence chief also said that North Korea will conduct another nuclear test whenever it wants to create a threat in an attempt to extract concessions out of the US and South Korea. Now, the grey and rainy week we are enduring here in Korea this week matches the gloominess that's hanging over the global economy. Bar the United States, numbers are flat or worse, with the Eurozone logging 0% growth and Japan negative growth in the second quarter. Geopolitical concerns in a variety of different hotspots around the world are adding to these apprehensions, making it difficult for the export-driven Korean economy to gain much traction in the current climate. Our Song Ji-sun has this report.
Latest reports by the Korean government and economic research institutes reveal that most of the world's largest economies are showing significant downside risks that could drag on Korean and emerging economies as well. The Eurozone, which accounts for 17% of the global economy, failed to grow at all in the second quarter from the first quarter. The gain in consumer prices in the Eurozone also marked the lowest level in nearly 5 years at a mere 0.4%. Both indicators show a typical double-dip phenomenon, meaning the European economy showed weak signs of recovery, then fell back to a slump. Japan's stagnant economy is expected to remain in the doldrums for another few years, with exports not rebounding enough to bolster its economy and domestic spending continuing to shrink. Japan's economy contracted 6.8% in real terms in the second quarter, the lowest level seen since the devastating earthquake and tsunami 3 years ago. Citing officials, Bloomberg reported that Japan's central bank could slash its 2014 growth outlook to less than 1%, with many private economists predicting growth rate of less than 0.5%. The Japanese central bank has already revised down its growth forecast for this year 3 times. The U.S. is the only bright spot, with its GDP logging a 4% growth in the second quarter. But its momentum can largely be affected by the slowing demand from the Eurozone and a widely expected decision by the U.S. Federal Reserve to raise its benchmark interest rate in the coming month. Crises in Ukraine, Iraq, and Gaza also have the potential to derail the global economic recovery. That could spell a tough road ahead for the Korean economy, which relies heavily on exports. 송지선, Arirang News.
Now, the so-called Pope Francis effect apparently extends to the Pope-mobile as well. Sales of Kia Motors' Soul model shot up last week after Pope Francis used the compact car to get around during his trip to Korea. The company says an average of 32.5 cars were sold per day in the country right before the Pope arrived to shortly after he left. That's up 63% compared to the same period last month. Now, Kia forecasts global sales of the Soul model to spike as well in the months to come. Pope Francis caused quite a stir in Korea by traveling around in this compact car, which he had requested before his arrival. And Korean battery maker LG Chem has won a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars from Audi to supply batteries for their plug-in hybrid and micro-hybrid electric vehicles. LG Chem declined to give out details, but did say it expects the deal to boost orders from Audi's parent company, Volkswagen, in the future. The Korean firm has already secured 20 global customers, including General Motors and Ford, and supplied batteries for 320,000 electric vehicles since it began production in 2009.
Now, in the past, language and cultural barriers deterred Asians from leaving their homelands in search of work and maybe a better life, but that trend is changing quite quickly. A new report from the United Nations shows, in fact, that the number of people moving from one Asian country to another is rising very rapidly. Our Kim Hyun-bin explains why.
The number of people moving from one Asian country to another has risen dramatically over the last 10 years. According to the UN 2013 International Migration Report, released on Wednesday, roughly 20 million Asians migrated within the continent last year. Many are leaving their homelands in search of work, others because of marriage. As countries in Northeast Asia, like Korea and Japan, suffer from the effect of low birth rates, a labor gap has emerged. It's being filled more and more by cheap labor from South Asia and Southeast Asia. Some 2 million Southeast Asians and South Asians moved to Northeast Asia last year for work or international marriage last year. That's nearly double the total from 2000. And looking at Vietnam alone, over 17,000 Vietnamese migrated to Korea in 2000. By 2013, the figure has soared to 120,000. While Northeast Asia has seen an influx of immigrants, its numbers pale in comparison to West Asia. Some 13.5 million people migrated from South Asia to the west of the continent last year. They're making the move for similar reasons. Middle Eastern countries may be rich in oil, but they also have relatively small populations, requiring them to look outside their borders for hard labor. That's opened the employment door for people from India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, who have seized the opportunity. The number of Southeast Asians moving to the Middle East for work has also risen, with the number last year falling about 2.8 million. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now back here in Korea, and the sluggish economy and lack of decent jobs for graduates, for young people in Korea, means there's a growing number of adults still living with their parents. In fact, a new report released by the Seoul city government shows nearly half of all senior citizens living in the capital have their adult children living with them. The majority say their children are unable to afford a place of their own because of financial reasons. Many of these senior citizens are also taking care of their grandchildren. Over 30% of the adult children staying with their parents admitted they are incapable of supporting themselves financially. The current unemployment rate of those aged 15 to 29 currently stands at 9%. Once considered a reserve of the academic world, Korean researchers are increasingly putting math theorems to more practical use, applying them in everyday gadgets and devices, as our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The application of math theorems provides an important foundation for the advancement of modern technology. 3D printers, one of the most promising inventions of the 21st century, are based on a calculus theory known as Fubini's theorem. Introduced by Guido Fubini in the early 20th century, it states that in order to materialize an object with n-level dimensions, one can do so by piling up the matter of n-1 dimensions.
If it wasn't for Fubini's theorem, it would not have been possible to intricately pile layer upon layer to produce a three-dimensional object. The rudimentary alternative is to take a large object and sharpen it, but this method cannot produce the sophisticated designs like those made by 3D printers.
Due to its growing importance, Korea has increasingly tried to find ways to nourish local mathematicians and has been making significant progress in the field over the past 30 years. Korea ranked first in the International Mathematical Olympiads in 2012 and has maintained a top 7 ranking since. A number of math dissertations from Korea have been published in academic journals overseas, putting it at 11th in the world. However, Park Kyung-ju, professor at Pohang University of Science and Technology, says there's still a long way to go in terms of promoting the quality of research. He's emphasizing the need to create a conducive environment for local mathematicians.
So they tend to do research whose results are kind of predictable, or they know for sure that they can solve. Instead of actually challenging the problems that can actually make impacts. The problem is the whole research infrastructure, including grants opportunities, promotes that mindset.
The winners of this year's Fields Medals, which are among the most prestigious awards in mathematics, underscore the importance of quality education in nurturing young mathematicians so that they can experience and appreciate the beauty of the subject and stay the course. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And time now for a look through some of the other international headlines we're following this hour. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim at the News Center.
Eunice, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder is in Ferguson, Missouri tonight, and he's already held meetings with community leaders there. What has he been saying?
Well, Mark, the first thing on the Attorney General's mind was to assure the concerned community leaders in Ferguson that the federal probe will be a full, fair, and independent one, just as he had said prior to leaving for Missouri. Holder said he was confident that the substantial number of FBI agents who had been canvassing the area were doing a great job to determine what exactly happened on August 9th, the night 18-year-old Michael Brown, unarmed, was shot by local police. He also made a point to say that the federal probe was different from ongoing local investigations in that his will be looking for violations of federal criminal civil rights statutes. Meanwhile, the 11th night of protests appeared to have been less violent. Police took into custody 47 people and seized several loaded firearms. Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu has promised to continue his campaign against Gaza militants with all means and as is needed. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict resurged early Wednesday as both sides blamed each other for the collapse in peace talks in Egypt. In a televised address, Netanyahu called Hamas a branch of the same tree to the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, vowing to secure full security and quiet for Israelis. The Israeli military said it carried out 92 airstrikes in response to some 140 rockets shot into its airspace since the truce talks broke down. Among those targeted was Hamas military commander Mohammed Deif, who survived, according to Hamas officials, while his wife and infant son were killed Tuesday. Police, military, and rescue personnel are pouring through the remains of what was a mountain neighborhood in western Japan after a record deluge unleashed havoc there. At least 39 people are feared dead and several others missing. Aerial shots of the region just outside of Hiroshima City showed scores of homes crushed and buried by rock and mud. Japan's weather agency said some 240 millimeters of rain fell, about a month's worth, in the 24 hours leading up to Wednesday's morning, about half of that in an hour's time. Weather officials warned more rain could be on the way that could trigger even more landslides. 4 McDonald's locations in Moscow have been given the order to temporarily shut down. This after Russia's federal consumer watchdog said inspections showed the restaurants had violated sanitary regulations. Critics say the Golden Arches have become the latest subject to Russia's fury at punishing economic sanctions imposed on it by the West. Among the 4 eateries issued the notice was a historic one in Pushkin Square. It opened just before the fall of the Soviet Union and is the most frequented McDonald's in the world, according to the company.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about
Taking the ice bucket challenge may be the next thing on your bucket list, as the internet is currently awash with videos of celebrities and even world leaders tipping ice cold water over themselves and nominating others to take one for the team. Now, the challenge aims to raise awareness and donations for ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. Kwon-soo reports.
Charity can be so much fun. The Ice Bucket Challenge is going viral around the world. All you have to do is dump a bucket of ice water over your head or let others do it for you within 24 hours after being nominated, or donate $100 to the ALS Association. The association helps people suffering from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or Lou Gehrig's disease. Once you have been nominated and drenched yourself, it's your turn to choose 3 other people. And it's the more fun when the most well-known people in the world take the challenge.
To you all who challenged me, I do not think it's presidential for me to be splashed with ice water, so I'm simply going to write you a check.
Or not.
Yesterday was Bill's birthday, and my gift to Bill is a bucket of cold water.
Now I nominate Ellen, Barack Obama.
The internet is full of clips of people like Tom Cruise, Lady Gaga, and others not only showing their down-to-earth side, but tipping ice-cold water over themselves and donating to a great cause. The challenge has also made its way to Korea. Actor Cho In-sung grabbed the headlines when he nominated a baseball player of the same name. Former pro basketball player Park Seung-il, who has been battling with Lou Gehrig's disease, took the challenge in his own way with snow spray, which touched many people. Although there's some criticism that the challenge makes light of such a serious illness, it has fulfilled its main purpose of raising awareness and tens of millions of dollars. According to the ALS Association, donations have rocketed to $31.5 million in less than a month, compared to the under $2 million raised over the same period last year. Kwon-soo, Arirang News.
Now, someone who may or may not have done the water bucket challenge is French film director Luc Besson, and he's most well known for his visually rich films like The Fifth Element and Leon. Well, he's back in the spotlight now with his latest feature. It's called Lucy, and it stars Scarlett Johansson, Morgan Freeman, and Korean actor Che Min-sik. And Besson was in Seoul on Wednesday to promote the film, and our Shin Se-min was there.
Manipulating time and controlling people. According to Luc Besson's latest film, Lucy, if humans were able to use 100% of their cerebral cognitive powers, they'd all have such super abilities. The movie stars Scarlett Johansson as a character who accidentally gains superpowers from a brain-enhancing drug and lays revenge on the dealer who sets her up, played by Korea's own Che Min-sik. Besson's twisted plot was inspired by the old myth that human beings use only 10% of their brain power, an idea that's impacted the director.
As an adventurer, I always challenge and experience all things myself, and I have personally become more picky as an audience member over the age of 50. I've been working to make a solid film that contains both action and a thrilling psychological element, and Lucy is it.
Basong is known worldwide, but this film marks the first Hollywood debut for Chem, and many media outlets have applauded his performance, even saying that he saves the film. While promoting the movie, Che said it was an honor to work with such a renowned director like Basong, adding that he learned a lot from the experience. Already garnering box office earnings of over $130 million worldwide, this psychological action thriller is expected to hit the Korean theaters on September 4th. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
It was pouring down here in Seoul this morning. Even heavy rain warning was in place for about 2 hours, but thankfully rain tapered off and the warning has been lifted at the moment. Though the mountainous regions of the northern areas will see about 120 millimeters, while down south will see about 10 to 50 during the day. And the rain should let up in the southern regions starting this afternoon, while other areas will have rain until tomorrow afternoon. With that, here are the readings. For today, the high in the capital will make to 24, while Gwangju and Busan will climb to 27. And for other regions, Jeju Island will get up to 28 and Mount Kumgang rise to 18. That's all for me today, and back to you guys in the studio.
Well, thank you, Chien, and that does it for this edition of Newsline at Noon.
Yes, thank you ever so much for watching the program, and do take care if you're heading out today in the rain, and Jinju and I will be back again at the same time tomorrow.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.